As the war between Israel and Hamas continues to escalate, many people are wondering what will happen to the Middle East. Can peace be achieved? Can Hamas be defeated? Coming up on our next installment of America's Hope, we break it all down for you and give you insights of how peace is being brokered behind the scenes and how hope must prevail. Good evening, I'm Kelly Wright, and this is America's Hope. And wherever you are, we do hope that you're safe and well, taking care of yourself and your family because you matter. You might ask, why do I say that all the time? Well, it's true. You do matter, and we matter to God and each other, particularly what's going on in our world today. We have a war going on in the Middle East and Israel, between Israel and Hamas. We have a war going on in Ukraine. There are yet wars and rumors of wars. So yeah, you do matter. You matter to your family. You matter to your neighbor. And it's time that we treat each other as such. Tonight we're going to focus on Israel. We're going to focus on how they're finding out that people do matter. Their neighbors, their friends, their loved ones, people that they lost after the October 7th surprise attack that became their 9/11. 15 times their 9/11, as President Joe Biden discussed. We're going to be speaking to someone who is living in Jerusalem, and we're also going to be speaking to a man from Toronto whose mother was in Israel, and we'll hear their stories tonight, their stories of hope and resiliency. Let's get started. And welcome to America's Hope. It's always good of you to be a part of our program, and we hope that wherever you are, that you are indeed letting hope prevail. As the war in Israel continues to escalate and fears and concerns grow about a possibility of it becoming a regional war, and of course the humanitarian crisis that's unfolding as a result of this on both sides, I should point out, because of what happened to the Israelis on October 7th. They have been displaced, their homes destroyed. And then of course there's the humanitarian crisis that's unfolding due to the counterattack. But again, keep in mind the culprit in all this and the initiator of this is Hamas, the terrorist group. We wanted to talk about this, and we're focusing on it now with someone who is very familiar with Israel. He's joining us from Jerusalem. Michael Mistretta is the CEO of an organization called FIRM. FIRM is an acronym for Fellowship of Israel-Related Ministries. He was born in Toronto, Canada, and Michael was raised in the church and later received a call to Israel where he met Pastor Wayne Hillsden and helped to start FIRM. And he joins us now to weigh in on what's happening. Michael, it's good of you to join us this hour, especially at this critical time for Israel and even people living in Gaza and that entire region. On October 7th,
so
where were you?
Thanks for having me on the show.
Indeed, a pleasure to have you on. October 7th, when Israel experienced its own 9/11, where were you at that time?
Yeah, I was here in our home, downtown Jerusalem. Woke up to the sound of sirens, rocket sirens, which is rare for Jerusalem. I mean, some of the cities in the south have experienced this all the time, but I didn't do what I was supposed to do. I didn't go to the bomb shelter. I actually ran out on the street just to see what was happening. I saw rockets exploding overhead. And those sirens didn't go away. For about half a day, we had nonstop sirens in Jerusalem. The whole country was barraged with over 2,000 rockets. And we thought that was the worst of it. That's surprising on a Shabbat morning. It should have been quiet. Everything was shut down because of the Sabbath. And then we start hearing rumors that terrorists had infiltrated and come into Israel. It seemed unthinkable. 10, 20, maybe 50. Now we found over 1,500 terrorists had entered Israel. Those are just the ones that were killed in the country. We know now that several hundred more returned with over 200 hostages, 203 hostages now confirmed being held by Hamas and Islamic Jihad in Gaza, maybe as high as 250. And as we saw these reports, we couldn't believe our eyes. And truly, an attack like this has not happened in Israel. Some say for at least 50 years, but I would say even longer, that 1,300 civilians are killed in less than 72 hours. You said it's like a post 9/11 episode for Israel. That's truly the case. Just to compare the ratios, if 1,300 Israelis die in a country of 10 million, that would be the equivalent of 40,000 Americans dying in less than 72 hours. Truly a really tragic event.
And did you know any people in the kibbutzes or the towns and villages, or are you familiar with any of their relatives who had to endure this? And even people who attended the music festival. That music festival was designed to celebrate life with peace and unity. And even some of the people living in those towns and villages and kibbutzes, they had relationships with people on the Palestinian side. They saw themselves as being people who could be neighbors, coexisting, and then this happened.
Yeah, so I didn't know anyone personally, although we do have some friends of friends. And I had a friend that was supposed to be at that rave and didn't go, thank God. But now with Firm, we're helping to relocate and evacuate a lot of these people. So I've had conversations with those. Just yesterday, I was with a family that had to evacuate. They were on a kibbutz just 3 kilometers from the border of Gaza. And they just talked about their experiencing bodies in the street. Truly tragic. They had several friends that passed away. And as I was talking to this family, the daughter, her name is Danielle, 18-year-old girl, she said one of her best friends, Mika, was taken by Hamas from her home with her family and is currently being kept in Gaza. And so this is truly a tragic event. I've heard from pastors that were in the city of Sderot, gathered in a bomb shelter with their children, hearing Allahu Akbar in the streets for the first time they've ever heard that, and just seeing a massacre happen. And the most amazing thing to me is when I went down and visited one of these moshavs, these communities around Gaza, I talked to one of the head of the moshav, and she said, we were actually born in Gaza. These are Jewish people that were born inside Gaza. And in 2005, she said, I was the most optimistic person. We gave away our homes, our businesses, our hospitals, all in the name of peace. We hoped that it would bring peace. We established this community just 8 kilometers, 6 miles from the border of Gaza in the hope that there was peace. She said, I used to bring money and food through the fence to bring to my friends that were in Gaza. And she said that's the very same fence that now Hamas tore down and they killed and murdered our children.
Wow.
So this is a personal thing for so many people.
You know, Michael, what you just unpacked there is a truth that has not been told.
No.
And it's a truth that needs to be known, as we've heard from Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Conricus. He alluded to the fact that many people living along that border really appreciated their neighbors in Gaza, and like you just said, neighbor to neighbor, brother to brother, and yet because of this Hamas terrorist ideology, there's a hatred that was simmering there, and now it's spilled over into wanton violence and bloodthirsty attacks on innocent people. In the counter-strike that's going on, what are the people in Jerusalem and Israel saying about the IDF, the fact that so many 300,000 troops being called up to prepare for what seems to be an imminent ground incursion or ground invasion of Gaza?
Yeah, this is something that really affects the entire country. As you said, overnight, within 24 hours, 300,000 troops are mobilized, called up. It's not our military. These are our sons and our daughters, our brothers and our sisters, people on our staff, our team called up, children, siblings of those on our staff, on our team. So this affects the entire nation. And not just the 300,000 people called up. Now it's been even more, 450 to 500,000 have been called up. Imagine that's 450 to 500,000 families that are being affected. Now schools canceled, and so people are at home. Some are doing online learning back to the COVID days. And so there's never been, since I've lived in Israel, and since a lot of people have lived in Israel, there's never been such a sense of national camaraderie, national unity. You know, in the face of crisis, it just brought our nation together. We have had one of the most divisive years for Israel politically. I mean, some of our constituents, like 40 weeks of straight protesting against some Supreme Court changes. But overnight, this crisis really brought everyone together. And you've seen people coming, serving troops. We've been handing out mattresses and power banks for batteries. And how do we get protective life vests? And how do we feed them? And how do we help? And everyone's really come together to say, man, this didn't just affect one of us. This affected all of us. It was an attack on the soul of our nation.
You talked about earlier the hostage situation, and certainly there are some 200 hostages, and Americans are among those hostages. It's been reported that Hamas will start trying to offer those hostages in exchange for Israel agreeing to a ceasefire. This is part and parcel of how Hamas operates. As you know, Israel Defense Forces has categorically stated that Hamas does this quite often. They use humans as hostages and human shields. How is that playing out in the discussions that you're having among people throughout Jerusalem?
Yeah, it's the whole negotiation over hostages is a sensitive topic for Israelis, just because going back almost 15 years now, we had a single soldier, not a civilian, a soldier who was a hostage in Gaza by Hamas, Gilad Shalit, and very controversial. It took several years of negotiation, but we ended up releasing 1,000 Palestinian prisoners in exchange for one. So Israel values life, but this time around, they really went too far. Just imagine a nation having 1,000 funerals, 1,300 funerals in the course of a week. Now we've had a couple hundred soldiers also killed. This is not something that Israel will forget. This is something that is not a one-time event. This has been a constant thorn in Israel's back since 2005, 2007, when Israel turned over Gaza to the Palestinians and they elected Hamas, and Hamas killed the other parties and started funneling all the funds they received into rockets and terror tunnels. This is something that it's been an annoyance, but now they've crossed the line that really they can't go back. And so Israel is not going to go to a ceasefire easily. I don't even think Hamas would settle for a ceasefire without seeing prisoners returned from Israel. And so we're definitely looking at an escalation here. I think we could see that just even in the last 2 days as President Biden was here yesterday, and now the representatives from the United Kingdom as well were here today. We're getting a lot of international buy-in and support prior to making any next steps.
Israel does have a right to defend itself, as the President of the United States stated. And I'm talking to Michael Mistretta. He's the CEO of FIRM, which is a Fellowship of Israel-related ministries. We're going to take a break, Michael. We'll come back and talk to you more, because the fact that you're involved in ministry from a faith perspective, I suspect that you are not giving up on hope for a brighter tomorrow. We'll talk about that next. Welcome back to America's Hope. I'm talking to Michael Mistretta. He is the CEO of FIRM, a Fellowship of Israel-related ministries, and he joins us now from Jerusalem. And Michael, in our previous segment, you were talking about all that's transpired since the surprise October 7th attack on innocent civilians living along the northern border between Gaza and Israel. Since then, there's been a lot of fallout. There's been a lot of heartbreak on both sides. But there's one side that you have always related to, and that's the side of trying to help people understand faith, understand hope, understand love, even in the midst of a crisis. But have you ever imagined or seen a crisis this perilous?
No, we really couldn't have anticipated something like this, and it's something so personal to so many Israelis, so many families that have been so deeply affected. And we don't know how long this is going to last. At first, it seemed like a couple days, a few weeks. Now we're looking at months, and I really think the ramifications are going to last for years. And so we feel an imperative as believers in the land. We may be a small body of believers. We have in the country of Israel about almost 10 million people, and only about 30 to 40,000 Jewish believers in Jesus, maybe 6,000 Christian evangelical Arabs. So we're a fraction of 1% of the population. But we really believe that if we work together, we can shine light in the midst of darkness, bring hope in a hopeless situation. And I'll be honest with you, it was very difficult the morning after, the Sunday, October 8th, waking up, feeling like you woke up to a bad dream, starting to see the images, just the horrendous atrocities that had taken place, and trying to call together believers across the land to stand together to help. It felt like post 9/11 shock. Half your team was called up for the reserves, the other half were home with their kids, and some fled the country. So the remaining people were just sitting in the trauma of it all. But as a ministry, as FIRM, we are a fellowship of Israel-related ministries. We serve a network of 72 gospel-centered local congregations and ministries that do the work of the Lord and try to shine the light of Yeshua in this land. And so I was blessed to see within 24 to 48 hours, several of our local partners across the country start coming together saying, what's the need? How do we help to evacuate? How do we help to relocate people? Now, 50,000 displaced people from the south of Israel along the Gaza border. Now we're seeing the attacks up in Lebanon. Even just earlier today, a couple hours ago, we saw an increased amount of activity from Hezbollah firing rockets into Lebanon, from Lebanon into Israel. And so now we have another 50,000 people on the verge of evacuating there. So how do we help evacuate and relocate people? How do we help provide emergency food, water, and then also emergency supplies and critical equipment that's needed, generators and battery packs and mattresses and everything that's needed, but to do it as the local body shining the light of Yeshua. And so we've seen that happen. We've seen all of our partners come together, and really there's a spirit of collaboration that's happened. And I can share some of the stories of that, but just ministries that specialize in different things working together. It doesn't matter whose name, whose logo, it's really there's one name, and that's the name of Yeshua that we're lifting high. And we're just seeing so many people that are hurting. The need is truly so great.
You know, you're mentioning Yeshua, and for those who are watching and may not understand Yeshua, it's Hebrew for Jesus, who obviously Christians view Jesus as the Messiah. And many Jewish people are waiting for the Messiah to return. And even, here's the irony of all of this, as you talk about the ministry that you have, helping so many people in the Holy Land. You have Christians, Muslims, and Jewish people side by side, living together, maybe not living in harmony. Certainly harmony would not be going on right now between Islam and Judaism and even Christianity. But it's odd to me and ironic to me that all three of those faiths actually talk about Yeshua and have different perspectives on who he is. Do you find that even in the midst of this crisis that while there's a political component and a military component and a physical component in terms of meeting the humanitarian needs, there's also that spiritual component? And could that be the road to reconciliation?
Absolutely. I think it's definitely a spiritual component, because hope is such a spiritual thing. You know, it's connected to faith. And even just yesterday, we had 500 displaced people, about 130 families come down right on the Lebanon border, 2 kilometers off the border in their kibbutz or moshav right there. They fled down. We're able to host them thanks to amazing partners at a hotel in Jerusalem, just love on their children. And just seeing hopelessness, fear, these elements that, we had one father call us. We didn't have enough rooms, and so this father called us, and he talked to us with tears in his eyes, saying he has 2 sets of twins. They could not sleep at night just with the sound of rockets and explosions, and there were anti-tank missiles that were fired. 3 people were killed the day before, and he just begged us to get him a room at this hotel. And just seeing joy reinfused, seeing hope reinfused is really something truly special. And I would say in Israel, we don't really debate the existence of a God. We have Jews, and we have Christians, and we have Muslims, and everyone believes in God here. Not everyone, but most of our culture believes in God. We just really debate what he's like and who the Messiah is. Those are the where we differ and disagree. And so I think when we can show that through our actions. In fact, it's very interesting you bring this up because we launched a national movement of volunteers along with other ministries called Le'echa, which means love your neighbor, taken out of the book of Leviticus.
Wow.
And we obviously, that's significant to us as Jesus followers, as Yeshua followers, because Yeshua says the great commandment is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. But the second is to love your neighbor as yourself. And we just think that's the message we want to send in the midst of this time. We're going to love our neighbor. We know Yeshua even challenges us to love our enemies. And amazingly enough, the only place we're seeing reconciliation in Israel between Jews and Arabs is between Jewish believers, Messianic Jews, and Arab Christians. In fact, Arab Christians have offered to take in Jews that are fleeing from this conflict, from this war, into their own homes. And I think that's such a picture of the gospel message.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Love your neighbor. Love your neighbor as you love yourself, as the scripture goes. And And certainly that's what you're striving to do, even in the midst of these dire circumstances that are unfolding and causing the entire world to keep its eye on this wonderful land known as Israel, size of New Jersey, and then you're talking about Gaza, which is probably the size of Washington, D.C., jammed with people from all different ethnicities in these two regions. And my prayer for you, Michael, is that you continue to do what you're doing. It sounds to me like you, and I know you have a wife and two young sons. As you move forward, I'm reminded of a scripture in Jeremiah, which is part of the Torah, that says God's plans for you are not for disaster, but for a future and a hope. And yet when he gave that through the prophet Jeremiah, they were on their way to being exiled from their homeland. Am I speaking some irony here?
No, I think that's exactly the message I desire to preach, which is God speaking to Israel in their time of crisis, in their time of really at the bottom of, at the end of their rope, in the darkest day. He's saying, I know the plans I have for you, to prosper you, not to harm you, to give you hope in the future. I love that. I think that's definitely the message we want to speak to Israel right now, a message of comfort, a message of love. I think we feel that as we see Christians around the world praying. And something that the Lord laid on our hearts was, especially for Christians, to pray for Israel, but to pray for Israel by name. And the verse that came to mind is Isaiah chapter 49, where Zion says to God, am I forsaken? Am I forgotten by God? But God responds. He says, can a nursing mother forget her child? Can she have not compassion on the son of her womb? He says, surely even she may forget, but I will not forget you. Behold, I've inscribed you on the palms of my hands. And we took that message and said, well, I think God wants to speak to us in this generation, that he's written us on the palms of his hands. And so we have a website, Pray for Israel by Name. We've listed the names of all 200 plus hostages, and we're challenging people to write the name of one of the hostages on your hand as a symbol, as a symbolic gesture that God has Israel written on the palm of his hands. And as we look at our hands throughout the day, just remember to pray for them by name. We've already seen tens of thousands of Christians around the world, churches, take this on and put the name of every captive on their hands.
Yeah,
and we really believe that God's going to bring them home.
That's very proactive and wonderful. I want to ask you one final question, Michael. Here in America, there are some members of Congress, as well as on college campuses, people who are protesting Israel and casting aspersions against Israel as trying to commit genocide of the Palestinian people. What would be your message to those particular members of Congress and those who are saying basically they support Hamas? What would be your message to them?
Yeah, the amazing thing is that this is not a new thing, anti-Semitism, this destructive mindset. In fact, I think it goes all the way back. We see it in Haman, when the children of Israel were in Persia. Yep. We see Haman wanted to kill the Jews. We saw it when Hitler wanted to annihilate the Jews. And we see the same thing in Hamas. And so from Haman to Hitler to Hamas, we see that it's a different wrapper, it's different clothing, but it's the same spirit. And so as we see protests around the world condemning Israel, actually vandalizing Jewish cemeteries, even violence towards Jewish people, it's not a surprise to us because it is the same spirit. But what I would say to people is where Israel goes, the rest of the free world is soon to follow. And so as America looks to Israel, we see what we're fighting up against. This Islamic Jihad, Hamas, this hatred for freedom, this hatred for Judeo-Christian values. We need to take a stand, one, in Israel's right to defend herself, but also supporting that Israel needs to even free innocent Palestinians from their own corrupt leaders that are not doing anything good. A lot of people are saying free Palestine, end the occupation. Well, the occupation in Gaza ended in 2005. And look at what happened. It's gotten much, much worse. In fact, the people in the West Bank that still are under the quote-unquote occupation actually have much better lives than those in Gaza. And so we need to pray that God would bring the right leaders and that God would lead Israel, if they eliminate Hamas, what to do next.
Michael Mistretta, CEO of the firm Fellowship of Israel-Related Ministries, thank you for joining us, my friend. Look forward to talking to you. Stay in touch. Know that our thoughts and prayers are with you and some of the people that you're helping We'd love to talk to them as well, but we're praying for you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
We'll be back with more in just a moment. And again, welcome to America's Hope. I'm joined now by Joel Etienne. He's a member of the United Jewish Appeal of Canada Advisory Board. He's also president of the Zichron Yisrael Synagogue Conservative Party of Canada. And he's a candidate of record for the District of York Centre in Toronto, Ontario. Co-founder of the EME Professional Corporation, Ontario, Canada law firm. He's a film producer and director and frequent contributor with Canada's French CBC in matters of public affairs. But most notably, his mother is Jewish and is living in Israel right now. Joel, thank you for being on America's Hope. What concerns do you have for your mom living in Israel during this particular time when Israel is now dealing with a crisis of war?
Well, I mean, I can give you the updates on my mother's situation, Kelly. She thankfully was able to leave Israel last night. It was of real concern for us. You should know that throughout, she's been living in Israel for almost a decade. It was a childhood dream for her to move to the Holy Land. And over the years, I mean, there have been rockets fired towards Israel. There have been terrorist attacks. Certainly not to the degree of the pogrom that we saw a week ago, but in context, my mother has been a brave soul all these years. She had never wanted to leave the country. There's a bomb shelter in her building, and despite the pleas of her children and grandchildren, she was always very adamant and ardently convinced that she wanted to stay in country. And we had rumblings that security concerns were to be had. And over these many weeks, I've been pushing her to try to leave the country. She refused to do so. But finally, last week, Thursday, Friday, she relented and decided she was going to make an effort. Although being a Canadian citizen, unfortunately, my country was unable to give her any assistance. She would call the helplines and get a deadline on the other side. And it was the government of France, without a French passport, that evacuated her last night. And she made it safely to Paris. So, and interestingly enough, even though she's living in the suburbs of Tel Aviv, you should know that rockets have made it to her neighborhood. I asked her for pictures. She has pictures of craters created by the Hamas rockets, terrorist rockets, who made it to neighborhoods very close to hers. And so the danger is real. When you're on the phone with her, you could hear when she's calling from the shelter. You could hear the rockets. You could hear the whistling noise of it. It's quite unnerving. She's been quite brave, but at the same time, my perspective was, at her age, if she's in harm's way, then God forbid, if she's occupying a bed that a soldier needs, or she's putting a soldier's life in harm's way to try to save her and help her, she's really of no help to the state of Israel. So I thought it would be better for her to come to Canada. But she calls Israel home, and she's certainly upset about having to move around the planet now. But small world problems in comparison with the problems that the rest of Israel is facing right now.
Well, I'm delighted to hear that she is safe and sound in Paris and obviously in France, and making her way at some point to your home in Canada. I know that is a relief for you and your family. But for those who are still left behind in Israel, what are you hearing in terms of what their plight is as Israel continues to battle Hamas to try to destroy and disrupt this terrorist regime?
I would tell you that all of Israel, including Jewish diaspora around the world, is at the same time that we're mourning. It's a terrible period of bereavement for us. We're also mobilized. And I mean, certainly in my synagogue, we have probably 10 families who are directly affected insofar as the men have left. And in Hebrew, we call them miluim. It's the Israeli army is a civilian army of conscripted citizens. And so able-bodied men under the age of 45 are required to heed the call of duty. And we have many members who have left their wives and kids and who are on the front right now. including a lot of cousins of mine in Israel and it was very interesting to even learn about this. Cousins who are involved in regular civilian lives all of a sudden seconded, and thankfully, and I'm very in awe of them. I have positions of important responsibilities in terms of the go forward. Israel is logistically incredibly capable, the IDF as armed forces, but in the context of this unprecedented mobilization, hundreds of thousands of people, everything from the required amounts of helmets to flak security jackets to even masking tape is a scramble. People are scrambling to make sure that the state of readiness is meant to be what it's supposed to be.
Yeah, and Joel, I got to ask you, how do you feel as a Canadian, just to the north of the United States, hearing the news that President Joe Biden is going to visit Israel at this time? This is unprecedented, it's historic, and it's even precarious.
It's fascinating too, because it is, I would say, a historical anomaly in terms of American engagement in this way in an active conflict in the Middle East in relation to Israel. Historically, America has always been Israel's best friend. During the 1973 Yom Kippur War, I mean, Kissinger was on that plane and doing the back and forth, just like Secretary Blinken has been doing the same thing. But the active engagement of a president in that manner is unprecedented. I think it's meant to be an important message. That is meant to resonate across the Middle East. It's not just for Israel, but it's for America's other allies in the Middle East. It's also a message to America's foes in the Middle East. I think the Western nations would rather the situation be contained to Israel's southern border with Gaza, and not involved a bigger conflagration with Israel's enemies in the north, Hezbollah, Lebanon, Syria, and Iran. And it was very, very interesting to me, because usually the American reflex is a little bit to exercise a little bit of distancing at first. Usually, America is cautious to see, how things are going to shake up, what's going to happen, and then you have the louder voice that chimes in. I mean, we saw that. I remember when Saddam Hussein started sending those Scud missiles to Tel Aviv many, many moons ago, and the IDF got hot-headed and sent the planes to the F-18s to go and bomb Iraq during the first Gulf War. And if you remember, it was American planes that went up in the sky to intercept Israeli planes to tell them to make them turn around. It was again, as opposed to an immediate action, a reflexive action, and that's what I've historically seen with America. So this level of proactiveness is interesting.
We're going to take a slight break. I'll be back with more of my interview with Joel Etienne. That's next on America's Hope. And welcome back to America's Hope. I'm talking to Joel Etienne. He joins us from Toronto, Canada. And Joel is someone whose mother lived in Israel. She has made it out of harm's way now, getting safely to France. And we continue now with our conversation, our discussion about what's at stake in Israel. I wanted to talk to you about the fact that you've seen a rise in anti-Semitism throughout America as well as in Canada. And you, as the president of your synagogue association, what are you doing, or do you have to do, to ensure the safety of the people who practice their faith, and their faith just happens to be Judaism, and yet they're being maligned and threatened by those forces that are pro-Hamas?
If there is, I think as a community we're still in a state of shock, right? The Jewish population around the world is an incredibly small population, We live in the world where everybody speaks of 6 degrees of separation, but for us, it's probably 2 degrees of separation. I mean, case in point, there was a teacher in my daughter's high school whose brother was lost in the pogrom and the terrorist attack of last week. So it's always incredibly close. The first, when there's an attack, the first question is, how close will we be affected? But everybody is affected. Um, but at the same time, we're also realizing that we're living in a new normal. What is the new normal? The new normal is the psychological realization that governments are very good at handling yesterday's problems, yesterday's enemy. The good people learn from the good people, and the bad people learn from the bad people. And if there's any stories of success in terms of what happened last week, is, for example, you had veterans of the Lebanon War, guys my age or a little bit older, who got phone calls from their children who were in the desert, and put the machine guns in the truck and drove down from Tel Aviv to the desert, and fought their way through. One gentleman was actually kidnapped; his daughter was saved. But another gentleman was able to get his kids out. And it's the realization that that the state is not well equipped. Any government, any country is never equipped with today's new form of terrorism. They're always well equipped for yesterday's form of terrorism. And so for us, it's created a great rethink. What do we do as a community to make sure that we're protected if our governments aren't able to do the job? There's a very interesting little campus close to where my office is, where there is a mosque and a synagogue that are neighbors. And they've been historical, amazing friends. During COVID, they worked together. They did charity work together. They're best of friends, and real partners. And it was really disheartening to see that on Friday night, during mosque prayers, the police squad car was parked in front of the mosque. And on Saturday, 10 meters away, or 5 feet away, you had the police car parked at the synagogue, right? So there is this sense of siege. We're taking unprecedented community precautions that we never thought we would have to take. It was always a matter of pride in the Jewish community in North America that we did not have to live our lives as Jews the way our European counterparts have to. Where if you want to walk into a synagogue, you have to, go through the mechanical screening. You have to have everything checked. You have to show your passport. You're walking into a secure facility in a state of almost siege. And we're always proud to know that, okay, well, that's how it is in France, or that's how it could be in Germany, but this is not how it is in North America. And what we see now is, yes, that type of life. Just in Toronto's most populous Jewish neighborhood, 2 police stations were formed and shaped overnight. In the suburbs, the same thing. And by the way, I mean, we're certainly grateful to our people in blue for heeding the call of duty and coming to protect us. But at the same time, just to know that this could be the new normal, this could be a new reality for all of us. It's a cold shower that we're all facing, both like I said, in Toronto, in the Jewish community and the Muslim community.
Yeah, Joel, I guess my final question is, do you see an end to any hostility between Jewish and Muslim communities, and for that matter, Christian communities? Do you have a hope that someday, and do you foresee someday, that Palestinians and Jewish people can live side by side in Israel without the acrimony or the tense distrust of each other? And do you ever see them having a breakthrough to have some reconciliation and some normalcy of breaking bread together? Is that even possible?
First of all, I think that, in public affairs, all political leaders and community leaders, I think on both sides of the divide, do believe and have always expressed a belief and a hope for a 2-state solution. And I don't think that has changed in any way, shape, or form. And unfortunately, what's disheartening is that, as far as I'm concerned, we were so close to certainly Sunni and Jewish peace in the Middle East. so close to making a deal with the Saudi Arabia, and so close to a normalization that would lead to a regional peace. And at the same time, you have a generational bridge that I think was ready. It is ready, not only for dialogue, but for the conditions of convergence that bring about peace. Certainly out of Saudi Arabia, with a new generation that was ready to break bread and shake hands, as opposed to an older generation. And that generational shift is happening all across the Middle East. There was an incident at a soccer stadium in Tehran where the Hamas flag was being waved by a bunch of participants in the soccer stadium, and you have video of other Persians who were just going, who angrily were shutting that expression down, right? Don't think that because we're enemies with the Ayatollahs, that the entire Persian population is in support of the Ayatollahs. You know that they're not. And I would say that the majority of the Persian community is against the Ayatollahs. You see, so all we can do at this stage, because we're just at the precipice of something unprecedented, is read the tea leaves. And it's fascinating because you have these elements that tend to give you hope in a positive future that way. There was a big rally in Toronto. That was a pro-Israel rally, not this past Sunday, but the Sunday before, with thousands of people in attendance. And I would say, other than the Jewish community in attendance, the biggest other multicultural community that was in attendance was the Canadian Persian community. I mean, it's an amazing thing to witness. And at the same time, we're confronted with these signals of peace, but at the same time, you have these incredible signals of war. ISIS was always these psychopathic murderers that were for hire, that had been these individuals that had been involved in many conflicts. So today they're in Yemen, yesterday they were in Iraq, before that they were in Afghanistan, murderers for hire. But what's disheartening here is you witness an attack of this amplitude, and you have to come to the realization that if you had 1,000 terrorists that made it out of Gaza, not all of them, and probably the great majority of them, were not, veteran terrorists, right? The majority of them had to be homegrown Gaza citizens, who many of them may not have been involved in violence before. And then to look at the degree of depravity and of violence that they exercised so quickly, without remorse, without, you hear horror stories about the Second World War, militias that were, in complicity with the SS, Eastern European militias, Ukrainian militias. And what you often hear is that, okay, these people committed atrocities, but they were drugged, they were with drunk alcoholics, but you again come to the realization that a lot of these people that participated in all of this in Gaza could not have been under the influence of substances. You can't drive 40 miles on a motorcycle and in a Jeep and use paragliders and be drunk, right? So you've got people who consciously, intentionally acted with this level of depravity, with keeping in mind that they were attacking, who had to be of the belief that they were not, that they were not attacking other human beings, while they were attacking women, children, and grandchildren. So, this is where, they say that the world is a very narrow bridge. The Hebrew song sings that, this Hebrew hymn, and then this is what's so confusing, is on the one hand you see great acts of humanity, and you see at the same time great acts of depravity, and we all have to hope that that the psychopaths are not going to rule the day, and that good people will be able to get a handle of the situation. But I think that's the crossroads where we are right now.
Joel Etienne, good friend from Canada, attorney, a politician, and president of a synagogue association. Appreciate you so much for sharing your insights on this and your expansive knowledge and history of this subject. And certainly, like you, I'm hoping for better angels to prevail. Joel, thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. A pleasure.
I'd like to thank all of our guests who appeared on tonight's program. Michael Mistretta, as well as Joel Etienne, two men who understand how important love is, how important faith is, and how important it is to never let hope be extinguished, but to let it endure and prevail. In summing up tonight's program, I would echo what Michael Mistretta says. Love God, love thy neighbor. Oh, and by the way, love and pray for your enemy. Think about that, America. Until next time, keep spreading love, freedom, and peace. Good night.
Explosions rip through the heart of the city, inflicting pain and casualty. A cowardly act of despicable terror, increasing fear and misery.
Oh, it's so crazy,
The way we're living our lives.
oh, it's so crazy.
This kind of living ain't right. In times like these, do you ever wonder? We need a savior. In times like these, do you ever wonder? We need a savior. Your broken heart, so bruised and battered, tearing apart at the seams.
My America. We agree to disagree, but still live in harmony because we are a family. God bless your America and my America.
United we stand, divided